So, for those who know me, they know that yes, I am an artist, as you all know, but I am an opinionated artist. So let's talk about those opinions. Welcome back to a new video, and today I decided to share my opinions that nobody asked for. So today we are going to be ranking, in my opinion, of course, I mean it's subject to anyone's opinion, but you know, it's okay to be wrong. We're going to be ranking the most iconic, or some of the most iconic works of fine art in the world and in history. And I will also be telling you why I have these opinions. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with the Scream. So for those who don't know, the Scream was painted by Edvard Munch, completed in 1893. So Munch created the painting when he was really struggling with mental illness and mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, and he painted the Scream to reflect that. I personally love the Scream. Where do I want to put it? I think it's a solid A tier. We'll go with that. I think the backstory is beautiful. I am a person where I am a sucker for a good backstory, especially when it comes to fine art, because I love to know about the human behind the art. That is my favorite, and I think it's a really touching backstory. Let's go with the birth of Venus, our favorite girl boss, lover. So it was painted by Sandro Botticelli, completed all the way back in the mid 1480s. It's freaking old. So the painting was commissioned by the powerful Medici family of Florence, and it was intended to celebrate love and beauty, much like the goddess Venus. Today it is housed in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and it is considered one of the greatest works of the Italian Renaissance. So I'm not personally a fan of Renaissance art. I'm more of a Baroque girly, as you will come to see. But I like her. I'll go B tier. I'm already ready for all the art fans to yell at me. I'm prepared for it. So let's start off with a bang. Let's go with the Mona Lisa. So I have opinions about the Mona Lisa, for those who don't know. It is the most iconic painting in the entire world. My beef is why it's iconic. So first, for a bit of backstory, it was painted by the one and only Leonardo da Vinci between 1503 and 1506. It is a portrait of Lisa Gherardini, a wealthy merchant's wife from Florence. It was just, a painting. The reason it is a very popular painting, the most popular painting, is because it got stolen twice. 2 times. Now, shout out to the person who stole it. It was a night guard, if I'm not mistaken. It was a night guard who stole it because he liked it and just hung it up in his kitchen. I mean, sure. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, and I don't blame him. Go off, I guess. But that's really the only reason it is so famous, is because it was stolen twice. And Da Vinci, in my opinion, has done much more important and legendary paintings than this. And just works in general, like the Vitruvian Man, for those who don't know. It is one of our most iconic and most important pieces of art, because it is one of the reasons we know so much about the human anatomy in modern medicine today. The Mona Lisa is just there. She was just stolen. That's it. So, because I'm a hater. Oh, God. D tier for now. I really was wanting to do it F tier, but there are paintings I hate more. And people will not like me for that. Speaking of hate, we'll go to the opposite. A painting I could not love more. The Starry Night. It was completed by Vincent van Gogh in 1889. And this painting, it pulls such a visceral emotion out of me. It was from the view of his asylum room in France. He checked himself in to an asylum because he was going through a really rough time in his life, struggling with mental illness and loneliness. The Starry Night was painted during this time, and it has this sort of beauty of, like, I would say a sense of optimism and hope in a dark patch. And it's not only is it physically beautiful, but the story is even more so. So S tier. Let's go with next, The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali, also known as the quote-unquote melting clocks painting. So obviously it was painted by Salvador Dali, completed in 1931. Dali said himself that his inspiration for the painting was melting cheese he saw in the sun. Awesome. Love it. It is a visual representation of Dali's obsession with time and is considered one of the most important works of the Surrealist movement. And I think it's silly. I like it. Easy. A tier. He's just so silly. I mean, he wasn't not a great person, but he is credit for being silly. I love silly. What shall we do next? Let's go American Gothic, which is a painting I have actually seen in person. It is a painting by Grant Wood, completed in 1930. This painting is often interpreted as a celebration of rural life and the virtues of hard work and self-reliance. It is now in the Art Institute of Chicago, where I have seen it, and it has become an iconic image of American culture. Most of his paintings, if not all of his paintings, are about American culture, and it's kind of spooky too, and I love it. We'll go A tier for now, subject to change. Girl with a Pearl Earring by Johann Vermeer. One of my personal favorites. It is a very iconic Baroque piece, which you can tell by the value contrast, which is truly what Vermeer was famous for. He was considered a master of light, and that is truly the dead giveaway of the Baroque movement, which came right after Renaissance, which is the late 1650s onwards, up until Rococo, of course. This piece was painted in the 17th century, like I have previously stated. It had many, many, many names. The name Girl with a Pearl Earring is only actually a recent name. So some researchers are actually still unsure whether the girl's earring in the painting is actually a pearl. Some say it is metal, and some don't even know if it's actually an earring because there is no hook. A fascinating part is in 2018, a new study showed that the painting's background has not always been black. Vermeer actually painted the girl in front of a green curtain, which is an interesting subject to me because a lot of older paintings that we see now, the colors are completely different now than what they started out as. This happens because of what is known as light fastness. Light fastness is essentially how do pigments fare in light and, more importantly, sunlight. So this was mostly discovered when people realized that Rembrandt actually used a lot of blue, which is no longer visible because all the blue paint he used has faded over time. A lot of paints, way back when, were made out of minerals. There was no lab-created paints and pigments, so they had to use what they had. So there was reds like carmine, which was made from bugs, basically. Mummy brown was self-explanatory. And then there was the blues, which was made from minerals like cobalt. So they were not made to last. So the blues, the greens, faded. So it's interesting to think that what we are seeing is not actually what the painting looked like. And the only way that people find out about what colors it actually was is they test for the minerals, because the minerals are still there. The pigment is not. And I think it's just a beautiful painting. Easy S tier for me. So now we're moving on to Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. Personally, one of my favorite artists. I love Edward Hopper, and I love this piece. I've also seen this piece in person. It is a beautiful piece. It is actually also at the Art Institute of Chicago, much like American Gothic. Edward Hopper is a very interesting artist because he was very, very isolated, and he really focused on Americana. A lot of his paintings are images of New York City or just city-based. You can really see his vision of America. And interestingly enough about Edward Hopper is he has so many paintings of so many places, and rarely do you see a crowd in it, if any at all. He visualizes a very condensed, busy space with nobody there. And I love the feeling of Nighthawks specifically, and I always have. Easy S tier. Let's do The Kiss by Gustav Klimt. This was considered the artist's last chance to save his reputation. He completed a series previously called the Vienna Ceiling Paintings at the University of Vienna's Great Hall, but they were perceived as shameless. Klimt even had to borrow money to repay his commission to Vienna's Ministry of Education, so he was truly taking a risk when he painted this. However, the painting was loved so much that it was purchased before it was even finished. And I like it. I'd say it's more of a B tier for me. It's a very iconic painting and a lot of people love it. I think for our next painting, we will do Washington Crossing the Delaware. So this painting, completed in 1851, it was painted almost 75 years after the Revolutionary War, but it was also painted by a German artist, Emanuel Lucci, in Dusseldorf. It's an okay painting, C tier. I think for our next one, we'll do the Andolfini Portrait by Jan van Eyck, done in 1434. So, the couple is thought to be Giovanni di Niccolo di Arnolfini and his wife, Casatana Trenta, wealthy Italians living in Bruges, West Flanders. And interestingly enough, it has a really weird composition. Does the painting celebrate the couple's wedding or a different event? Is the bride pregnant, or is she simply just dressed in a poofy outfit? Who is in the convex mirror? And it has a weird placement of Van Eyck's signature, which directly above it suggests one of the men may be the artist himself. Also just because it's creepy and not in the way I like. D tier. Also, I'm sorry. Let's move on to one of my favorites, The Son of Man by René Magritte, done in 1946. In The Son of Man, which is a very iconic self-portrait of the artist with an apple in front of his face. The apple is a common motif used by Magritte, but nobody knows for certain the true meaning of the apple motif. The title chosen by Magritte is perhaps more illuminating, referencing Jesus Christ. Some critics have called the piece a surrealist interpretation of the transfiguration of Jesus. Now, I'm not religious, so I don't know what on earth that means, but it's up to your interpretation. I just think it's neat. A tier. Now here is the point in the video we get to my Roman Empire. Christ at the Storm of Galilee by Rembrandt. So for those who have not seen the Netflix docuseries, This Is a Robbery, this painting was purchased by Isabella Stewart Gardner in 1898. This painting is from the year 1633. This was Rembrandt's only painted seascape, and it rested at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston until the fateful day of March 18th, 1990, when around 1 a.m. two officers, quote unquote, came in and insisted on speaking to the night guard, saying they had a warrant for his arrest. So he let them in, and the quote unquote officers tied him up and said, by the way, this is a robbery. Along with 13 other paintings, 12 other paintings, the storm at the Sea of Galilee vanished, leaving just the frames of all the pieces neatly cut out with the frames laying all over the ground. And every time that a lead was found, miraculously, it started leading to the Italian mob. Who would have guessed? They started dying, sleeping with the fishes, with new concrete boots, lead to the head. You get the idea. And unfortunately, as of recently, the night guard, one of the only people who may have known what happened that day had just recently passed away, and more witnesses are passing away as well. And not a single one of those artifacts has ever been recovered. Personally, I even have a Google alert set up so I get emails because not a day goes by where I don't hope that painting is at least being taken care of. A lot of people have theories, some of which are more outlandish than others, but I just hope that this painting comes home. We shall see. I'm gonna call it A tier. Moving on, let's do Untitled by Jean-Michel Basquiat, done in 1982. So he started out as a nobody, just a Brooklyn graffiti artist, and then he became a legendary painter. He died at the age of 27 from a heroin overdose because he was battling demons of his own. And one of Basquiat's untitled works in December 2018 set a record at Sotheby's, selling for $110.5 million. It spurred the owner to have the Basquiat painting authenticated, and interestingly enough, an ultraviolet light examination revealed that the painting included elements drawn by Basquiat in invisible ink. Basquiat was a well-known artist within the Village neighborhood of New York City, frequently visited and occupied by members of the LGBTQ community, and it's been that way since ever. And other artists like Keith Haring also frequented the Village. Because of my love for Basquiat, this is not one of my favorite paintings of his, but I do love him. I think we'll go B tier. And let's talk about a very interesting painting, Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci, painted in the year 1500. This painting is interesting to me because this is truly the reason why so many people think Jesus is white. It is inspired by this painting, which ironically was a painting of Salvator Mundi, which was Leonardo da Vinci's gay friend. So Jesus is white, that means he's also gay. We'll go C tier though, because Da Vinci fan. Alright, what do I want to talk about next? How about A Sunday on Le Grand Jatte? The painting by Georges Seurat was painted in 1884, and Seurat was famous for his use of pointillism, a painting technique where you make everything out of tiny little dots. It took him 2 years to finish this. It is 7 feet by 10 feet, and it's kind of just unreal. It's so cool. I don't know how he had the patience to do that. We'll go A tier. Next up, Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix, done in 1830. Now, it may be familiar to people from the cover of Coldplay's Viva la Vida. It was originally intended to celebrate the July Revolution of 1830. Now, the central composition is the central figure of a woman holding the tricolor, which is considered to be the earliest known depiction of Marianne, the female personification of the Republic of France. The value contrast is truly something else, and for those who don't know, I love me some good value contrast. B tier. I think we should move on to The Last Supper, another one of the most iconic paintings in the entire world, and another Da Vinci. Yay. The Last Supper was created between 1495 to 1498. It depicts the moment Jesus told his disciples that one of them would betray him the following day. It is filled with symbolic references, but one of the most is the container of spilled salt by Judas's arm, which is commonly considered a bad omen, foreshadowing his treachery. That's so rude. Leonardo used an experimental technique for this painting. He applied tempera paint and mixed media directly to the stone wall that this was painted on. It attributed to the severe deterioration that occurred to the painting within Da Vinci's own lifetime. The work was, nevertheless, highly admired, and there were many attempts to restore it throughout the centuries. It's overrated. I'm sorry. Alright, let's go with Saturn Eating His Son by Francisco Goya, one of his paintings as part of the Black series. Interestingly enough about Goya, he was a very, very famous portraiture painter. He was commissioned by a lot of aristocrats and even royalty to paint for them. Turns out he was also a huge people pleaser, but he ended up dejected and depressed because the government really did not like his political views. They didn't trust him, so he created the Black series, and they are all massive paintings painted on the walls of his house in Spain, and they're very gory and very fun. I like them. A tier. I'm totally okay, by the way. So I think next up, and I'm just gonna do these two back to back, Claude Monet, Japanese footbridge and water lilies. Both were painted at his garden in Giverny. I love Monet, I really do. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. So he spent a lot of time really immersing himself in nature, and that's why a lot of his paintings really reflect that in his love for the nature he was surrounding himself with. Easy S tier, both of them. I'm biased, I don't care. Anyways, that was fun. Now for heartbreak. Van Gogh's Sunflowers. Oh boy. So Vincent van Gogh tried to make a artist residency. So he painted the sunflowers, communicating, in his words, gratitude for his friend, painter Paul Gauguin, had come to live with him in the artist residency for a while, and he hung the first two of his sunflower portraits in Gauguin's room. Gauguin was impressed by the sunflowers, and according to the website of the Van Gogh Museum, he thought were quote-unquote completely Vincent. Van Gogh had already painted a new version during his friend's stay, and Gauguin later asked for one as a gift, which Vincent was reluctant to give him. So one part that really breaks my heart is that when Vincent died, all of his sunflower paintings were lined up by his grave because he loved sunflowers so much. And even today, people leave sunflowers on his grave. And that's devastating to me, and it makes me so sad, but I love him so much, and I just think it's truly a beautiful story. I love it. S tier. And I think that this video has run on and on and on and on and on for long enough, so I might make a part 2 later, because I don't want to keep you guys longer than you want to be kept. So I might make a part 2 because I do have a lot more opinions. So I think that does it for today, and let me know if you want a part 2. I'd be happy to do one. Toodles.